Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll proceed with the witness that was on the stand yesterday. And sir, I would remind you that you're still currently under oath. Yes, sir. You may proceed, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you put me back up, please? All right, Detective, after you finished your testimony yesterday afternoon, did you realize you had, I guess, transposed or mixed up the locations where two of the swabs you collected were taken from?
Yes,
And were those from the kitchen area?
that's correct.
That'd be the upper left in Exhibit 49 that we're looking at?
Correct.
And I believe we've got Exhibit 5-56 up. And yesterday when we were talking about the swabs were collected as Exhibits 59 and 60, I believe you testified that 59 was taken close to the refrigerator.
One more.
So somewhere around there, and then 60 would have been taken someplace farther over in the flooring. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Can you point out where 59, where that swab was actually taken?
So they were reversed. As tent number, if I could refer to my tent notes, please.
Would that help refresh your recollection?
It would. So tent 10 would have been the wet spot here next to the refrigerator, and tent 9 would have been the dried spots over here.
And for tent 10, was that the swab that was in Exhibit 60?
Yes,
And the second tent you mentioned, that was Exhibit 59.
correct.
Detective, when you collect evidence, and we talked yesterday about a bunch of swabs, for example, placed in boxes and then in envelopes. Does the sheriff's office do anything to mark on those envelopes to identify what those items are?
Yes, we do.
And how do you mark those envelopes for identification purposes?
So we do handwritten notes explaining what the item is, where it was located, date and time, and who collected. And then in addition to that, when they are entered into our Beast evidence system, a label is generated, and that label has a specific number for that specific item. That label is placed on that envelope.
So does every item that gets collected receive its own, I guess, special identification number when you log it into evidence?
It does.
And then that number is printed on the white stickers that we see on the exhibit containers?
That's correct.
When you send an item to the state crime lab, the DCI lab, for testing, do they assign their own independent item number for everything you send in?
Yes, they do.
Wait, yesterday we finished with the kitchen. And then after that, did you do anything to process the living room?
Yes, we did.
Again, could you point out for us where in Exhibit 49 the living room is located?
This area here, upper right.
Detective, as part of processing the living rooms and its contents.
I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
All right, Detective, I've just handed you kind of a thick stack. I'm showing you what have been marked for identification purposes as exhibits 5-36, 5-52A, 5-41, 5-79, 5-80, 5-188, 5-37A, 5-38, 5-43, 5-45, 5-84, 5-90, 5-95, 5-102, 5-107, 5-108, 5-117, 5-119, 5-121, 5-136, 5-114, 5-141A, 5-143, 5-146, 5-147, 5-149, 5-153, 5-154, 5-151A, 5-162, 5-163, 5-166, 5-167, 5-168, and 5-169. Let me know when you've had a chance to look through those, please.
Yes, sir.
Right. Are those photographs of the living room and its contents at 105 Crestview Drive, Apartment 4 in Parkview, Iowa?
They are.
Did you take those photographs?
I did.
When did you take them?
The morning of March 14th, 2024.
Do some of those photographs show Taylor Escontrias' body?
They do.
And do the photographs of her body include blue boxes covering her private areas?
They do.
All right. Other than the blue boxes over Taylor's private areas, do these photographs fairly and accurately depict the living room and its contents as you saw them on March 14, 2024?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, I'd move to admit State's Exhibits 5-36, 5-52A, 5-41, 5-79, 5-80, 5-188, 5-37A, 5-38, 5-43, 5-45, 5-84, 5-90, 5-95, 5-102, 5-107, 5-108, 5-117, 5-119, 5-121, 5-136, 5-114, 5-141A, 5-143, 5-146, 5-147, 5-149, 5-153, 5-154, 5-151A, 5-162, 5-163, 5-166, 5-167, 5-168, and 5-169.
Those exhibits will be admitted.
May I publish, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, putting back up Exhibit 49, can you point out the living room and remind us about the contents we see in the diagram?
Sure. Upper right corner is going to be the living room. This long rectangle is going to be the couch, and the square box is going to be the recliner.
All right. And where's the front door for the apartment?
The front door is going to be this line here.
Start with Exhibit 5-36. What do we see here?
This is going to be taken from the hallway, I guess, entrance, if you will, into the living room, showing the couch, the recliner, over here on the left side, a shirt, pillow, a black cloth here, and Miss Escontrias' foot area.
Your Honor, we're about to, within a few slides, move into photographs that show Ms. Escontrias' body. I'd request that you direct the media outlets to, I guess, avert their cameras from the monitors or my laptop screen for her privacy.
Thank you for the warning, and the media has been notified of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at 5-52A, what can we see here?
This is the pink shirt from the previous photo with blood on it, which is located behind the recliner.
All right, and do we also see blood stains in the carpeting in this photograph?
We do. We see blood stains here, moving up towards the top, as well as blood drops over here on this side.
All right, and would the kitchen area be at the very top of the photograph?
That's correct.
All right, did you collect the pink shirt we see in 5-52A?
Yes, sir.
May I excuse me, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 24. Would you please take a look at it and let me know if you recognize it?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 24?
This would be the pink clothing that we had taken from the scene.
All right. Without opening the bag, can you determine whether it appears to be in substantially the same condition as when you collected it?
It does.
And what did you do with the pink shirt after you collected it?
It was also taken back to our patrol headquarters after it was bagged at the scene. We actually had to put it into a drying chamber, which is located in our secure area of our evidence in order for it to dry.
And what was it wet with?
Blood.
And then after it dried, did you place it in that clear bag that you're holding?
I did.
All right. And was Exhibit 24 sent to the DCI crime lab for possible testing?
It was.
Can you determine whether that bag has been opened since you sealed it?
It has not.
All right. Your Honor, I'd move to omit State's Exhibit 24.
No objection.
Exhibit 24 will be admitted.
Turning to Exhibit 5-41, what do we see here?
This photo shows, again, the couch from the previous photo as well, showing a baseball bat with dried blood on it on the couch.
And what do we see here?
This is going to be a black cloth, which if I'm correct, it would be a small towel, and then a pillow up here, and blood staining here.
Did you collect that black cloth that we see on the floor?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may. You may.
All right, Detective, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 27. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
All right. And what is State's Exhibit 27?
It is black clothing.
And is that black cloth that we saw here on the floor in Exhibit 5-41?
It is not.
Okay. Do you know where State's Exhibit 27 was collected?
I do.
And where was it collected from?
It would have been in between the recliner and the couch.
Okay.
On the floor, excuse me.
And does Exhibit 27 appear to be in substantially the same condition as it was when you collected it?
It does.
And do you know if it was sent to the DCI lab for testing?
Yes.
And was it or was it not sent?
It was sent but not tested.
Your Honor, at this time I move to omit State's Exhibit 27.
No objection.
Exhibit 27 is admitted.
Turning to Exhibit 5-79, what do we see here?
This would be the baseball bat that was laying on the couch from the previous photo, the barrel portion.
All right, and are there any notable features of the barrel portion we see in 5-79?
Yes, the bat itself is an original orange color, but as you can see on the lettering here, as well as some down here, as well as throughout the barrel, is dried blood.
And what do we see in 5-80?
So this is going to be the center portion of that same bat, again with more dried blood moving toward the handle.
Did you collect the bat that you found on the couch?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 23 and previously admitted. Is this the bat that you collected from the couch at the apartment?
It is.
And what do we see in Exhibit 188?
This is going to be the recliner next to the couch.
All right. And you see anything of evidentiary value in this photograph?
As we can see, the previous state's exhibit here from the tent number 6 will be the black clothing that was retrieved. And on the recliner itself, we see multiple bloodstain transfers and patterns on that chair.
Did you take swabs from any of the bloodstains on the chair that we see in 5-188?
Not that I recall, but I'm not sure.
All right. Would it help refresh your recollection if you could look at the notes you've got showing where swabs are taken from?
Yes, please.
Please take a look at that, and when you're done, let us know if that refreshed your recollection.
Yes, sir.
Did that refresh your memory?
I did.
All right. Did you take a swab from the chair we see in 5-188?
It's correct, marked tent number 5.
All right. And at this point, do you recall which of those stains you swabbed?
I do not.
All right. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes, the State's Exhibit 58. Can you take a look at that, and please let me know if you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
And what is Exhibit 58?
Blood swabs located from tent number 5.
Would you be on the chair that we see in Exhibit 5-188?
That's correct.
Did you use the same procedure we talked about yesterday to collect those swabs?
I did.
So I dip the Q-tip in distilled water, then rub it against the suspected blood stain?
That's correct.
And did you package the swabs in a box and then place them in the envelope you're holding?
That's correct.
And did you, or I guess Sergeant Wall, seal that bag or that, the container to make sure that it wasn't tampered with or the contents altered?
That's correct.
And do you see Sergeant Wall's initials on the seal?
I do.
Can you tell whether Exhibit 58 has been opened since you and Sergeant Wall sealed it?
Yes, it appears to.
All right. And was Exhibit 58 sent to the DCI lab for testing?
It was.
And does Exhibit 58 look like it should look if it had been opened at the crime lab for testing?
Correct.
All right. Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibit 58.
No objection.
Exhibit 58 will be admitted.
Next, we have Exhibit 5-37A. Can you please tell us what we're looking at here?
This would be the living room from the backside of the couch on the right. Pointing toward the main living room area and front door, as we can see here, Miss Escontrias' body is lying on the floor next to that front door.
All right. Can you see any suspected blood evidence in this photograph?
Much, covering her body as well as on the floor here, on the door moving upward, as well as the wall projecting out as well.
And can you tell us what that is?
That'll be a blood stain as well.
Moving to Exhibit 5-38, what are we looking at?
This was moving towards the right from the previous photo. Again, Miss Escontrias' body is on the floor here. The same blood on the wall. As we can see more, or the full front door, we can see multiple bloodstain patterns on the front door, and as well as the floor moving around, and you can start seeing more on this right wall.
Is this how Taylor's body was positioned when you arrived on scene?
Yes, it was.
In Exhibit 5-43, what can we see here?
Again, Miss Escontrias' body here, and as an overall in her final resting position.
Is there anything else of evidentiary significance that we see here that we couldn't make out in other photos so far?
No.
And at 5-45, what do we see in this photo?
Moving toward the right, that right wall from 2 slides ago is going to be blood pooling on the floor here, and then we have several blood stain patterns here on the right wall.
Next is 5-84. What can we see here?
Miss Escontrias' body, an overall photo taken from the left side of her body.
All right. For this blood on the wall kind of near her head, can you tell us what type of blood stains we're looking at?
Objection, speculation.
The witness is
Overruled.
As you can see on the wall here, there is blood spatter patterns here. Again, they range from 1 to 3 up to possibly 4 to 5 millimeters, which indicate they are could be an impact spatter here. As you can see, directionality is linear as well as like a radial cone, and they come back to one area or near this area here.
We've got a tent. What is the tent number that's next to Taylor's head?
Tent number 1.
Okay, I bring that up because I'll be referring to it when we get to a later slide. Can you make out in this photograph any injuries to Taylor's body?
Yes, as we can see here, there is a blood stain mark here, which appears to be the same shape as the baseball bat. Bruising to Miss Escontrias' back here, and as we move up here, this again is going to be marks indicating from the baseball bat.
Is there anything else in Exhibit 5-84 that stands out as especially significant that we have not discussed yet?
You can start to see it, but her ear does have injury to it as well.
Turning to 5-90, what are we looking at?
This is going to be taken from the right side of Miss Escontrias' body. Again, we can see more the same baseball bat strike from here, bruising across the mid-back, and then again more blood strikes that match this baseball bat here, and bruising within.
Can you make out any other injuries that weren't visible in the previous photograph?
There is going to be some injuries to the base of her neck up here.
And do we have later photographs a little bit closer that'll make it a little clearer what we're looking at?
Yes.
What do we see in Exhibit 5-95?
This was taken of Miss Escontrias' leg. It is a void rectangle-shaped pattern that was on her leg. As you can see, it's a cleaned blood area here, or clear from debris here, and then a distinct rectangle shape.
What creates a void pattern?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Void patterns are created when
Objection, Your Honor, this exceeds the scope of the minutes of testimony.
Have a bench conference. may proceed, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Your Honor. Without going to how void patterns are made, did you find any objects in the apartment that matched the shape of the void area that we see in Exhibit 5-95?
Yes,
Now, what did you find that matches the general shape and size of that void pattern?
the cell phone.
Are you referring to the cell phone that was found on the bed in the primary bedroom?
That's correct.
Okay, we've got 5-102. What do we see in this exhibit?
This is going to be the upper back, excuse me, and head area of the left side of Miss Escontrias' head and body.
And can you make out, or did you observe any injuries that are captured in this photograph?
It is difficult to see given dried blood, but there is injury to the ear.
All right, how about to the upper back?
Yes, here,
Any other injuries?
if I recall correctly, here, but it would have to be a different angle.
All right, and then here, is this a mole?
It is.
Okay. And then in 5-107, what are we looking at?
Again, this is behind Miss Escontrias' left ear injury.
And 5-108,
This is going to be also the top area of Miss Escontrias' left side of her head, just indicating an injury here.
and looking at the wall to the upper right of the photograph, is that blood stain?
It is.
And what type of blood stains? Without going to trying to guess how it happened, what type of marks or blood stains are those?
It's a spatter pattern.
What do we see in 5-117?
This is going to be Miss Escontrias' right ear behind it, injury to this area here.
And is there anything in her hair?
Blood.
Okay, so like this area here below the ear, that's blood stain?
Yes.
What do we see in 5-119?
This was taken also from the right side of Miss Escontrias' head, a injury to the back right side.
5-121?
This is Miss Escontrias' right ear injury here, and then we also have an injury to the back side of her neck.
5-136?
Here we have an injury to the left side of Miss Escontrias' neck.
And 5-114?
This is an overall after we had rolled over Miss Escontrias.
Okay, so you rolled her over, I guess, away from the front door.
Correct.
And then, is this tent 1 that we saw earlier?
It is.
All right. Did you take a blood swab? Excuse me, did you take a blood swab from the area around tent 3?
Yes.
All right, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may. Thank you.
All right. Detective, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 57. Do you recognize what that is?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 57?
Blood swaps indicating from location tent number 3.
All right, so this spot we see here on the floor in 5-114.
Correct.
All right, and did you collect those swabs the way you collected all the others we've discussed yesterday and again this morning?
Correct.
Did you place them in a cardboard box?
Yes,
And did you then place that box in the envelope you're holding?
I do.
Right. Was that envelope sealed to make sure it wasn't tampered with or its contents altered?
It was.
And do you see your or Sergeant Wall's initials on the seal tape?
Sergeant Walls, yes.
Was Exhibit 57 sent to the State Crime Lab for analysis?
It was.
And can you tell whether Exhibit 57 has been opened since you sealed it?
It appears to, yes.
And does it appear the way you would expect if the DCI lab had tested that sample?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibit 57.
No objection.
Exhibit 57 will be admitted.
Then, going back to tent 1 that we see here on the right side of 5-114, did you take a swab of blood that's near that tent marker?
Yes,
Can you point out on the photo where you took the sample?
it was from the pooling area.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Detective, I've handed you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 56 for identification purposes. Do you recognize 56?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 56?
Blood swabs taken from the location of tent number 1.
All right. And did you handle those swabs the way you did all the others we've talked about up till now?
Yes,
All right. Did you or Sergeant Wall seal Exhibit 56 after you put the swabs inside?
Sergeant Wall's signature, yes.
All right. Was Exhibit 56 sent to the DCI lab for testing?
It was.
Has Exhibit 56 been opened since it was sealed?
It appears to, yes.
And does it appear the way you would expect if the DCI lab had tested its contents?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit State's Exhibit 56.
No objection.
Exhibit 56 will be admitted.
I guess I should ask, is there anything else of evidentiary significance in 5-114 that we've not discussed yet?
No.
Looking at 5-141A, what do we see?
This would be Miss Escontrias' right hand.
And can we make out any injuries in this photograph?
Yes, we can. We can see here, 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 and here.
Is there anything else of evidentiary significance in 5-141A that we haven't talked about?
This injury here does have a star shape or X pattern, if you will.
We'll get to that.
Sure.
With the autopsy physician. Anything else in 141A?
No.
Turning to Exhibit 5-143, what are we looking at?
This would be the inside of Miss Escontrias' hand.
And are any injuries visible in this photograph?
Yes, right here at the base of the thumb.
Can you tell what this is?
These are strands of hair here, and they move up here.
All right, were those on the hands when you arrived?
It would have been, we would have seen them when we rolled her.
All right, did you remove those hairs as part of processing the scene?
Not at the scene.
Turning to 5-146, what do we see?
Miss Escontrias' right forearm and an injury to that forearm.
Anything else of evidentiary significance in 5-146?
No.
Turning to 5-147, what do we see?
The outside of Miss Escontrias' left hand.
All right, and what do we see on the fingers?
Tattoo markings and a ring.
All right, why do you take a photograph of tattoo markings?
Identification purposes.
And what do we see in 5-149?
Miss Escontrias' forearm.
All right, and what do we see of evidentiary significance in this photo?
Another tattoo for identification purposes.
And were you able to make out any injuries on her right? Is this her left arm or her right arm?
I believe this is her left.
All right. Were you able to make out any injuries that are visible in this photograph?
No.
What do we see in 5-153?
Miss Escontrias' hands are bagged with paper bags.
All right. And why are her hands in paper bags?
We seal any evidence that may be held within her hands, fingernails, to make sure that that is collected at autopsy.
And for those loose hairs we saw earlier, were those still on her hands when her hands were bagged?
Yes.
What do we see in 5-154?
Again, this is Miss Escontrias' right hand, bagged with the initials BHMD and dated 3/14/24.
What do we see in 5-151A?
We have an injury to Miss Escontrias', I believe this is her left side.
I believe this is our last photograph of the body. What was done with Taylor's body after you finished taking photographs that we've looked at?
It was turned over to Thompson's funeral home, who retrieved her body from the residence and transported for autopsy.
Was her body placed in a body bag before it was transported away?
It was.
And what's involved with placing a body in a body bag?
Once her body was placed into the body bag, it is zipped and sealed with a toe tag, or a tag, if I will, and a clip for on the zippers.
All right, and what's the purpose of the clip on the zippers?
Security purposes,
All right, is it sort of like a padlock?
if you will.
Turning to 5-162, what do we see here?
This is the tag I had mentioned prior, giving Ms. Escontrias' information, the date and time, as well as that seal or lock, if you will.
I'm going to zoom in on the tag and that lock. And in this photograph, can you make out a serial number that's on that sort of lock on the tag?
It's difficult to read, but it is there.
All right. And the purpose for that is you can compare it when the body gets to the lab for an autopsy to make sure that the bag has not been opened.
Correct.
What do we see in 5-163?
So this is the living room area after Ms. Escontrias was removed from the scene.
And was anything revealed that we couldn't see in the earlier photographs?
More of the blood staining and pooling here, but that was visible in the other.
What do we see in 5-166?
This would be the interior of the front door.
And why did you document the front door with this photo?
So not only the blood stain patterns at the bottom, but as we move up, there are label marks for additional blood stain evidence.
So let's look at 5-167. What do we see here?
So we see the door lock, handle and deadbolt lock, labeled B, C, and a transfer pattern of D.
Are there any blood spatter stains visible in this photo?
There is.
And where are those located?
There's multiple amount here, that in directionality upward, and then the transfer pattern here. And we do have blood stain on both the handle and the lock.
Turning to 5-168, what are we looking at?
This is for the handle itself, as we can see blood staining on the handle.
All right. Did you swab the suspected blood that was found on the doorknob?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
We may.
Detective, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit 64. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is Exhibit 64?
A blood swab taken from the front door handle labeled B.
And was the swabs taken from the doorknob packaged and sealed the way we've discussed with the other swab evidence?
That's correct.
It was Exhibit 64 sent to the DCI lab for
It was.
testing?
It was.
Can you tell whether Exhibit 64 has been opened since you sealed it?
Yes, it appears to.
And does it appear today the way you would expect if the DCI lab had tested the swabs inside Exhibit 64?
It does.
Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibit 64.
No objection.
Exhibit 64 will be admitted.
Kim, can you put me back up, please? Thank you. Then, what do we see in 5-169?
This would be the deadbolt directly above the door handle labeled C.
Did you find suspected blood on the deadbolt?
Yes, there is staining here.
And did you take a sample of that staining?
We did.
All right, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Detective, I've handed you what's been marked as Exhibit 65 for identification purposes. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 65?
Blood swabs taken from the front door deadbolt labeled C.
And again, did you handle, package, and seal those swabs the way you did the other blood swab evidence we've discussed so far?
Yes.
And again, do you see Sergeant Wall's initials or signature on the seal tape?
I do.
Was Exhibit 65 sent to the State Crime Lab for testing?
It was.
Can you tell whether Exhibit 65 has been opened since you sealed it?
It appears to, yes.
And does Exhibit 65 look the way you would expect if the DCI lab had tested the swab samples inside Exhibit 65?
It does.
Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibit 65.
No objection.
Exhibit 65 will be admitted.
Did you take a photograph of the thermostat in apartment 4 at 105 Crestview Drive?
I did.
And why did you take that photograph?
To document the room temperature.
Looking at Exhibit 5-203, is this the photograph you took of the apartment's thermostat?
Yes.
And do you recall when during the process you took that photo, beginning, end, middle?
At the end.
Oh, I apologize, Your Honor. I don't believe that I've admitted that or shown that exhibit yet. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Let's try that again in reverse order. Detective, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes as 5-203. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is 5-203?
Photograph of the thermostat.
Did you take that photograph?
I did.
And when did you take it?
Morning of March 14th, 2024.
And does Exhibit 5-203 fairly and accurately depict the way the thermostat appeared when you saw it on March 14th, 2024?
It does.
Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibit 5-203.
No objection.
Exhibit 5-203 will be admitted.
Now we'll take a look at it. And what is the 5-203 show the temperature was in the apartment?
69 degrees.
And Your Honor, if we could take a brief recess, I've got an exhibit that appears to be missing, and I want to try to wrangle it before we wrap with Detective Grease.
I have no issue with that unless the defense does.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we'll take our mid-morning break. I would remind you of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves, and please continue to keep an open and attentive mind.
All rise for the jury.
Let the record reflect we're outside the presence of the jury. The defendant is present along with his counsel and counsel for the state. We had a bench conference, and the court would like to make a record of that bench conference. The defense was making an objection as to speculation by the witness of the exhibit that was showing a void as what was being discussed during the witness's testimony. The defense claimed that the minutes of testimony did not provide any information as to this witness testifying as to blood splatters and or transfers and as to this void. The defense also challenged whether this witness was an expert. The court ruled that this witness was qualified as an expert, as the state provided through questioning his training and experience as to his investigation and training as far as blood transfers and blood splatters. The state then stated that they would move on from that questioning, that they would only ask if there was something within the apartment that was that same shape of the void that was denoted on the photograph. It was also noted that the defense did not depose this witness in preparation of trial. And the state further stated that they would only be asking questions of this witness as his future testimony proceeded, as to any splatters or transfers, as to what they were, not to how they may have occurred, was my understanding from the state. State, is that a fair representation, or would you like to supplement?
I believe that's a fair representation, Your Honor.
In defense?
I'd like to supplement, Your Honor. The objections with respect to speculation had all been overruled. The sidebar was the result of an objection that the testimony exceeded the minutes of testimony. During the sidebar, we did discuss that the report was relatively generic in nature, provided simply notice that he had taken a number of photographs, a substantial number of photographs, and had collected some blood swabs. There was nothing in the report at all with reference to any testimony about conclusions he was anticipating making, or any justification or any experiments that led to making said conclusions. We were entirely caught off guard, could not anticipated this type of testimony. It was brought to the state's, I guess, brought to their attention during the sidebar, as well as Your Honors. Certainly, had we have known that this was going to be the intended testimony of this witness, we may very well have deposed, we may very well have hired an expert. But again, this was essentially an ambush with respect to the type of questions and the type of answers he was going to be providing. During the sidebar, it appeared that the state essentially conceded the issue, and I believe elected to move on from the matter. That was my recollection of the sidebar, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I think there's the state, or I think the defense is correct in terms of the scope of the minutes with respect to any testimony that would discuss how these bloodstains could have been specifically created. In other words, trying to narrate the events that occurred that night and how a particular smear was caused or how a particular spatter was caused. I think that's a fair objection. It was not our intention to elicit that testimony. I believe at least this morning, the only time that came up, I had asked Detective Grease if there was something of evidentiary significance in one of the photographs, and he talked about the blood spatter on the wall behind Taylor's head and that it could have been spray from a blow, essentially if her head was in that position. It was not our intention to elicit that, and we moved away from that as quickly as I could, and I don't believe we asked any further questions that would have invited the witness to try to explain specifically how he thought a particular blood stain was created. In terms of beyond the scope, beyond that, no objections were raised, I believe, with respect to scope of the minutes throughout yesterday's testimony when discussing particular types of stains, whether it was spatter versus touch, anything like that. That all came in yesterday without objection. I'm not sure how we can claim surprise today that there would be testimony of that nature. It wasn't objected to yesterday. That's all I have to add, Your Honor.
Thank you. We'll be in adjournment for about 15 minutes or so.
Thank you. into the death of Taylor Escontrias. I'm not sure if I asked you this. When did you become the chief state medical examiner for Iowa?
2016.
And did you work as the deputy state medical examiner before that?
Yes, so from between 2000 and 2016, I was the deputy state medical examiner.
Okay. Were you asked to perform an autopsy on the body of Taylor Escontrias?
Yes,
And when did you perform the autopsy?
that was March 18th, 2024.
Where do you perform autopsies, or I guess maybe let's be more specific, where did you perform the autopsy of Taylor Escontrias?
It was at the state medical examiner's office, which is located in Ankeny, Iowa, and on the map that's in central Iowa, about a 15-minute drive north of Des Moines.
Are bodies that are sent to your lab for autopsy, I guess, secured before you perform the autopsy?
Yes.
And how do you secure the bodies at your lab?
So the whole facility is gated, so we have control of who enters and exits the building. We also have an attendant who is there 24/7, and we have a controlled access to the coolers where the bodies are stored. In addition, as part of our procedures from the county to when the body is received, the body is placed in a body bag, and that's sealed. And so we note as part of the autopsy process if that seal is still intact.
Did you take photographs throughout your autopsy of Taylor's body to document what you saw?
Yes,
And did you take an x-ray of Taylor's head as part of your autopsy?
yes,
In preparation for your testimony this morning, did you identify a portion of those photographs that you believe would best help illustrate what you did and the conclusions you formed during Taylor's autopsy?
yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, I just handed you a thick set of photographs. If you please take a look at those while I identify what those are, or the markers on them. I'm showing you what have been marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 7-1, 7-2, 7-5, 7-12, 7-17, 7-27, 7-28, 7-35, 7-37, 7-38, 7-39, 7-42, 7-43, 7-73, 7-74, 7-75, 7-79, 7-81, 7-85, 7-87, 7-90, 7-91A, 7-93, 7-94, 7-96, 7-97, 7-98, 7-100, 7-104, 7-106, 7-107, 7-109, 7-111, 7-119, 7-137, 7-138, 7-139, and 7-152. Have you had a chance to, were you able to go through those while I was giving off the numbers?
Yes, all those numbers that you mentioned correlate in order what I just saw here.
Perfect. Do you recognize those exhibits?
Yes,
And are they the photographs and a head x-ray that you took during Taylor's autopsy?
yes,
And do these exhibits fairly and accurately depict what you observed during the autopsy?
yes,
Your Honor, I move to admit States Exhibits 7-1, 7-2, 7-5, 7-12, 7-17, 7-27, 7-28, 7-35, 7-37, 7-38, 7-39, 7-42, 7-43, 7-73, 7-74, 7-75, 7-79, 7-81, 7-85, 7-87, 7-90, 7-91A, 7-93, 7-94, 7-96, 7-97, 7-98, 7-100, 7-104, 7-106, 7-107, 7-109, 7-111, 7-119, 7-137, 7-138, 7-139, and 7-152.
Your Honor, no objection to the various exhibits just offered.
Those exhibits will be admitted.
May I have permission to publish, Your Honor?
You may.
And Doctor, did you prepare some PowerPoint slides that incorporate those exhibits?
Yes.
And we're referring to those slides help you explain what you observed during the autopsy and your findings.
Yes.
There we go. There we go. Sorry for that delay. Just one of those days. Oops. All right. Just for identification purposes, what we have up here is Exhibit 7-1. And what did you document in this photograph?
So there's a ruler with a number, so that's the case number. So you'll see that throughout all the pictures. This is the picture of a body bag, and there's a tag with Taylor's name on it. And then there's a blue tag with a number on it, and that's the seal that locks the two zippers. So this allows us to feel comfortable that nothing has entered or been taken away from the body bag from the scene until the time I actually do the autopsy.
You've got a pointer there kind of in front of you to the right. Could you just point out for the jury the serial number on that lock tag you've just described?
So here's the number, it's 6252937.
And was that seal still, I guess, sealed or shut when you began the autopsy process?
Yes, so you can see there's, well, when the person puts it on, there's like a little point that goes into a little clip, and the only way that that can come apart is if you actually cut it or break it apart.
Right. And that seal or lock that we see there was intact when you first saw it?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to slide 2. The big photo is Exhibit 7-5 and the small is 7-2. What did you document in these photos on this slide?
So before we did anything, before removing anything or cleaning, we opened the body bag, and this is the body as it was received before we did any manipulation or cleaning. And you can see that the hands are covered by paper bags, which is what the medical examiner at the scene would do to preserve any evidence on those hands. And then the medical examiner also put a toe tag, which you can see here again, identifying this as Taylor Escontrias.
In the next slide, we're going left to right, exhibits 7-28, 7-38, 7-39, and 7-27. And what did you document in these photos, and why have you collected them for this slide?
So one of the important things that we do during the autopsy is to confirm identification. So the things that we did to confirm identification is, one, to look at the face and then confirm that with an official photo with the Department of Transportation. Next, we confirm with family any descriptions of tattoos or scars, and we did able to confirm these various tattoos, confirming that the identity is Taylor Escontrias.
And were you also able to compare Taylor's face, as you saw it at autopsy, with driver's license records?
Yes.
In the next slide, going left to right, we have exhibits 7-12 and 7-17. And what have you documented with these photos?
So one of the other things that we do is to collect evidence on the outside of the body. So an example of important pieces of evidence that we collected, one, there was a wire which I identified as an orthodontic wire, which had been dislodged from the teeth, and that was loose, so we collected that. And then you can see that there's some loose hairs adherent to the back of the hand, which we collected and saved that as evidence as well.
As part of the autopsy, did you collect some of Taylor's blood that could later be used by the state crime lab to create or identify a DNA profile for Taylor?
Yes.
All right. And can you tell us how you did that?
During the internal portion of the examination, we use a hypodermic needle and remove the blood from an internal vein.
Okay, so you know the blood you're getting isn't maybe somebody else's blood that was on her skin?
Correct.
Right. And once you've withdrawn that blood using the needle, what do you do with it?
It's put in, there's a couple different things. Some of the blood is saved for toxicology testing, and other drops of blood are placed on a special filter paper that then is dried and that's preserved for future DNA analysis.
Once you do that, how do you store it or package it?
So the test tubes have to be kept in a very cold environment, so we have special freezers that are in a specially locked room. And then the DNA cards are placed in a coin envelope and sealed with evidence tape so that we know that when the examiner finally does the analysis in the crime lab, that nothing's been entered or taken away from that specimen.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Thank you.
Doctor, I've provided you with what's been marked as State's Exhibit 72. Do you recognize 72?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 72?
So it's a coin envelope, and it has a tape, evidence tape, and also the label of Taylor Escontrias, and it's also labeled as blood-stained card. So this is that filter paper with the blood spots that can be used for DNA analysis by the crime lab.
All right, and you said it's got tape that seals it?
Yes.
Did you place the tape on, I guess, the envelope in Exhibit 72?
Yes, with the assistance of one of my investigators.
And was Exhibit 72, after the autopsy, collected by the Scott County Sheriff's Office for transportation to the State Crime Lab for analysis?
Yes.
Can you tell whether Exhibit 72 has been opened since you sealed it?
It appears to me that there may have been a retaping of that.
Would you expect to see that if the State Crime Lab had analyzed the contents of that envelope?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move to admit State's Exhibit 72.
No objection, State 72, Your Honor.
Exhibit 72 will be admitted.
And Doctor, if we look back at your slides on the right, you mentioned there were some loose hairs on the right hand. Could you point those out? All right, and did you collect those?
Yes.
And what did you do with those hairs?
So we collect them, put them in a piece of paper, folded them, and then put them in an envelope similar to what you see here for the DNA card.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Doctor, I've handed you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 73. Do you recognize 73?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 73?
It's a coin envelope, and it's labeled with Taylor Escontrias, and it's also labeled loose hairs from right hand. And these are the hairs that are depicted in the photo that we just saw, and hairs that I took and placed in the envelope.
And is there evidence tape seal on that envelope?
Yes.
And did you seal the envelope?
Yes.
And how can you tell that you're the one who sealed it?
Because we have a date on there, and we also have initials.
All right. Are those your initials on the envelope?
Yes.
Was Exhibit 73 collected by the Scott County Sheriff's Office after the autopsy for transportation to the DCI lab for testing?
Yes.
Can you tell whether Exhibit 73 has been opened since you sealed it?
Yes.
And does it appear the way you would expect if the DCI lab had tested Exhibit 73's contents?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to omit Exhibit 73.
No objection, state 73, Your Honor.
Exhibit 73 will be admitted.
Doctor, as part of your autopsy, did you do anything to collect evidence from underneath Taylor's fingernails?
I actually collected the tips of the fingernails, and that would contain any materials that would be under them.
Okay. And can you talk to us about what tools you use and how you do that?
We use fingernail clippers, and each fingernail is clipped and then placed in a filter paper, which is then sealed and then placed in an envelope similar to what you see here.
Once you've collected those, what do you do with them? I think you said you put it in a coin envelope.
Yes.
Do you distinguish how you maintain or keep clippings from one hand versus the other?
Yeah, so we'll take all the clippings from one hand, place that in one envelope, and then all the clippings, so thumb through pinky, in the other envelope. So we don't distinguish each finger, but we do distinguish right hand from left hand fingernail clippings.
Do you use the same nail clippers for every nail?
We use one fingernail clippers for one hand and then another fingernail clippers for the other hand.
And are those clippers packaged together with the clippings themselves?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, I've just handed you what have been marked for state or identification purposes as Exhibits 74 and 75. And Mr. Puentes reminded me there's a question I forgot to ask before we dig into those. How do you know that the nail clippers aren't going to have stuff on them that then contaminates what you're collecting?
So we use brand new fingernail clippers for every single case and every time we do it. So there's just a one-use fingernail clippers.
And that's what you did in the case of Ms. Escontrias' autopsy?
Yes.
Okay. So looking at Exhibits 74 and 75, do you recognize them?
Yes.
And what are they?
So these are both coin envelopes with labeled with Taylor Escontrias' name on them, and then they're also labeled, one is fingernail clippings left, and the other is fingernail clippings right.
And have 74 and 75 been sealed with evidence tape to prevent tampering?
Yes.
Did you place that evidence tape on there?
Yes.
And do your initials and the date that you did so appear on Exhibits 74 and 75?
Yes.
Were Exhibits 74 and 75 collected by the Scott County Sheriff's Office after the autopsy for transportation to the DCI lab for testing?
Yes.
Can you tell whether either Exhibit 74 or 75 has been opened since you sealed them?
Yes, 75, and it looks like 74 also.
All right. And do exhibits 74 and 75 appear the way you would expect if the DCI lab had tested what was inside them?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to omit State's Exhibits 74 and 75.
No objection, state 74 or 75.
74 and 75 will be admitted.
Doctor, can you tell us what a sex assault kit is?
Yes, it's a series of specimens that are collected, and they usually consist of swabs, so much like a Q-tip, that are used to collect fluids from the body, so mainly from the genitalia area, inside the vagina, inside the mouth. And then that's all collected, and then it's later analyzed by a lab, looking for DNA and other types of information.
Is there an actual kit that you would work out, like a box that has collecting tools inside of it?
Yeah, it's a box. It looks like much like what a puzzle would come in, and there's all the individual envelopes and Q-tips in that box.
And after you collect the items for the kit, you then put them back in the box and seal it?
Yes.
Do you use a sex assault kit in every autopsy?
No.
Did you use a sex assault kit during Taylor's autopsy?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
One, she arrived with no clothing, and it was obvious to us that there had been some trauma to the body. So those are two factors that we would use to reflexively do a sexual assault kit.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, I've handed you what's marked for identification as State's Exhibit 76. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
Is that the sex assault kit you used during Taylor's autopsy?
Yes.
And everything you collected got put inside that box for sending to the DCI lab?
Yes.
Did you seal it?
So I handed this to my investigator, Caitlin Behal, so I observed her putting them in the box and sealing it, but she was the one that actually sealed it.
Okay. Did the Scott County Sheriff's Office later collect Exhibit 76 to transport it to the DCI lab?
Yes.
Can you tell whether Exhibit 76 has been opened since your investigator sealed it?
Yes.
And does 76 appear the way you would expect if it had been tested or its contents had been tested at the State Crime Lab?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to omit Exhibit 76.
No objection, state 76.
Exhibit 76 will be admitted.
Doctor, did you collect anything else during the autopsy?
There were other specimens that we collected as normal course, mostly for toxicology specimens.
Did you collect any personal property?
Yes.
And what did you collect?
So there were 4 different items: hair ties, the wire that we saw before. We also collected a piercing from the right cheek. And then there was a white ring from the left little finger.
I want to take you back to our slides now. The next slide, going left to right, we see exhibits 7-43, 7-35 is sort of the middle, and then 7-152. And what did you document in these photographs?
So in the photo in the upper left shows an injury in the gum. That also, it's a tear. There's also an abrasion right here on the right chin.
Before you move on, the middle photo is a little bit hard to orient. Can you tell us how the camera was pointed and what it was pointed at?
So the head is tilted back, and you're looking at the chin. So the neck would be right where the ruler is. This would be the tip of the chin right here. So right on that right side of the chin, you can see that red mark, and that's an abrasion, so some sort of impact. And both these injuries correlate with this X-ray, and you can see right here, there's that black area. So whenever you have a fracture, the bone is separated, so that black line, it demonstrates a fracture of the lower jaw or the mandible.
Can you speak to, I guess, maybe the amount or kind of force that would be necessary to cause that sort of fracture?
Yeah, the jaw is a fairly strong bone, so it would take a significant amount of impact to actually break the jaw. So a fall from a standing height, a significant punch or kick would all be things necessary to cause a fracture of the jaw.
I'm gonna, on the middle one, I'm gonna circle around a red mark on, looks like the right cheek. Can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, so we do have subsequent pictures that will demonstrate that better, but that's it's a pattern type injury. It's a penetrating injury that was likely caused by a Phillips screwdriver.
And we'll get to that when we get to the right slide. I wasn't sure if that was the cheek piercing you mentioned removing. Where was the cheek piercing located on her face?
I don't remember which side or where that was.
Okay. Anything else we need to see from this slide?
No.
So in the next one, the top row would be exhibits 7-73, 7-74, 7-75. And then the bottom row left to right are 7-81, 7-79, and 7-85. And Doctor, would you please tell us what you've documented in these photos?
Right, so we see two different types of injuries. One is what's called a blunt force injury, and so it's a laceration. So when something hits the skin or the body's moving in space and hits something hard, it's going to tear the skin. So that causes a laceration. So here we see over the right eyebrow is a laceration. We also see what we saw not quite clearly, but better here on the right cheek, is this star-shaped or a plus sign shape. That's caused by a Phillips screwdriver that was forcefully pushed through the skin. Then when we look over onto the right scalp here on this picture in the middle up, and it's arbitrarily labeled B, there's another laceration or tear. And then we can see that there are injuries to the right external ear. The picture just below that, we've pulled the ear so you can see more of the damage that was done in tearing to that ear, as well as the skin behind the ear causing those tears. And again, that's from a blunt force hitting that. And then we can also see a starburst here. And then this is a new type of injury. It's a sharp force injury from a knife. And then on the left scalp, and what we've done here, I did mention this before, but what we've done is we've shaved portions of the scalp hair out of the way so we can actually see it, and we've cleaned that area. So you can clearly see again, this is a laceration on the left scalp, and then behind the left external ear is another laceration or tear.
I want to ask you some follow-ups on some of these injuries. Looking at that upper left photo, the laceration below that A label, can you determine whether that was cut by like a sharp blade slicing versus some other mechanism?
Yeah, this was a blunt force. It was not caused by a blade. It was caused by some blunt instrument hitting that portion of the body, or the body going through space and being abruptly forced up against a wall or a floor or something like that.
Can you speak to the amount of force that would be necessary to cause that laceration above Taylor's right eye?
Yeah, I would consider this in the severe category. I can't give you like a metric to what that would be, but it would be a significant amount of force. So something like if you were to fall from a height or would have to receive a significant blow to cause that amount of tearing of the skin.
Is that injury above her right eye consistent with a wound that could be inflicted by a baseball bat?
Yes.
Then turning to the middle ones, again, the top photo below this label, I think it's B. I believe you said that was a laceration caused by a blunt force injury?
Yes.
Then below that, the ear, I guess you can see in the one above it as well, it looks like the ear's torn.
Yes.
And is there a, I guess, a chunk of ear missing, or is that just the ear's been torn so that the skin is separated like that?
The ear's been torn and separated, but you would be able to put that ear back together again. All the pieces are there.
And can you speak to what kind of mechanism could cause that tear to the ear?
Yeah, so this is a blunt force, so some blunt instrument like a bat hitting that area will cause these tears, and one or more of these different tears or lacerations you see there could have been caused by one blow or multiple blows.
Looking at the center photo bottom, behind the ear, can you tell me again what kind of injury that is?
Yeah, that's a tear or laceration.
Is that consistent with an injury you could inflict with a baseball bat?
Yes,
And the tearing of the ear, would that also be consistent with a baseball bat inflicted injury?
yes.
Can you speak to the amount of force that would be necessary to cause the injuries to the ear and the space behind it?
Yeah, I would put in the category of severe, so a significant blow or a fall from significant, like a full adult falling onto the ground.
And then these injuries, I guess on the neck or shoulders, do we have later photos that depict those more clearly?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the top right photo, this laceration marked C, again, is that a cutting injury, blunt force? What are we looking at?
Blunt force injury, tear, or laceration.
Okay. And is that consistent with an injury inflicted by a baseball bat?
Yes.
Can you how much force would be necessary to cause the injury we see in the upper right photo?
Yeah, so this is a full thickness tear, so again, it would be a severe amount of force.
And then the last photo, the lower right, labeled H, how can you end up with the sort of tear we see there?
So depending on the direction as the blow comes, it's going to cause a tearing of that skin. So if you had a blow coming from the behind and hitting, that would cause this injury. So you'd have injury behind the ear, but not necessarily to the ear itself.
And can you speak to the amount of force that would be needed to create the injury we see in the lower right photo?
Yeah, so again, this is a significant amount of force. It's not quite as deep and full thickness as, for instance, B and C, but again, a significant amount of force to actually tear the skin apart.
Right. And is the tear labeled H consistent with an injury caused by a baseball bat?
Yes.
Right. And is there anything else in this slide that we haven't talked about that was significant to your findings and conclusions?
No.
In the next slide, going left to right, we have exhibits 7-87, 7-100, and 7-104. Could you please tell us what we're seeing in these photos?
Yes, so the photo on the left, we've already seen the wound on C on the left scalp. What this picture is really focusing on is what's labeled I. That's a slit-like injury there. That's caused by a knife, so it's a stab wound. And this wound is significant because it actually injured a major vein in the neck called the internal jugular vein. So a majority of the blood that goes up to the brain has to go back down to the heart. And so injury to this vein would cause a significant amount of bleeding when the injury occurred.
Now, was that particular stab wound potentially fatal on its own?
Yes.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 29, which is previously admitted. Can you take a look at that? Could the knife in the box labeled 29 have, is this consistent with the puncture we were just looking at?
Yes.
Kim, could you put me back up, please? And Doctor, referring again to this puncture wound by marker I, can you speak to the amount of force that would have been necessary to create that injury?
So there would be some moderate force in order to penetrate through the skin, and then once the tip of the blade is through the skin, then it would be a mild amount of force.
Can you tell us what else you've documented in the photos in this slide, please?
So we've shaved the hair, so the middle photo, we've shaved a lot of the hair from the back of the scalp, and it depicts a number of different abrasions and lacerations. So it's a laceration with the margin of that abrasion, the margin of the laceration has an abrasion.
I think we should probably define terms. Is a laceration just a cut?
A laceration is a tear. A cut, and a tear comes from a blunt force, like an instrument, like a bat.
Okay.
A cut is from a knife, so a sharp edge actually cutting the tissue.
Is there a medical term for an injury caused by, for example, a knife or a bladed instrument?
Yeah, so we use two terms when injury is caused by a knife. One is a stab wound, and that's when the wound is deeper than it is wide. And then a cut wound or an incised wound is when the wound is wider than it is deep.
And you just used the term abrasion. Could you define that for us, please?
Yeah, so an abrasion is a frictional component when something rubs up against the skin. The classic example is when you were in the schoolyard, you fell on the pavement and you skinned your knee. That was an abrasion.
All right. So looking at the photo in the middle and the injuries to the back of the head and the area that's been shaved, were all of those blunt force lacerations?
Yes.
And can you determine whether these injuries represent separate blows to the head?
They all have fairly discrete geometric locations, but it is possible that one or two of these could have been from a single blow, but I would favor them being from all separate blows.
And the injuries we're seeing on the shaved portion of the back of her head in the middle photo, are those all, are any or all of them consistent with the sort of injury you could inflict by striking someone in the head with a baseball bat?
Yes.
And can you speak to the amount of force that would be necessary to create the injuries we're seeing on the shaved portion of the back of Taylor's head in the middle photo?
Yes, it would have been severe. So most of these injuries involve the entire thickness of the scalp.
Did you document any other injuries in the photos on this slide?
Yes, on the photo on the right side of the screen are these injuries that are in a row across the lower portion of the scalp, and these were all screwdriver injuries. They had that plus sign appearance to them, which would be consistent with penetration by a Phillips screwdriver.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 25. You take a look at that. Is the screwdriver in State's Exhibit 25, I guess, consistent with the injuries you were just describing to the base of Taylor's scalp?
Yes.
You know what, I will get that out of your way so stuff isn't toppling. May I reapproach, Your Honor?
You may. And if, Mr. Jones, are you going on to another exhibit?
There will be further after this. We can finish up this slide if you like and then stop.
That's fine. Thank you.
All right. Doctor, did you document any other injuries in the photos in this slide?
There are other injuries. The most notable are these injuries on the back of the neck. These injuries, this one in particular, is important because it was caused by a knife or a sharp injury, a sharp force injury, and this penetrated into the back of the neck, and it injured tissue that holds the skull to the top of the spinal column, and So the anatomy is there's the brain, and then the spinal cord connects to the brain through a hole at the base of the skull, and then it goes down through the spinal column. So what supports the head on this spinal column and protects that spinal cord from injury are these membranes. And the term used is the atlantis, which is that highest, most bone in the spinal column. And then the occipital bone is the base of the skull, so it's called the atlanto-occipital membrane. So it's a membrane that connects the skull to the spinal column. That was damaged as the knife went through and cut it. So now the skull is lax, and it can actually cause and did cause injury to the upper spinal cord.
If that were the only injury that had occurred, what would the long-term consequences be from that injury to the connection of the spinal column with the skull?
If Taylor had survived, what I would be most concerned about would be paralysis to some degree.
Could the knife that we showed you in State's Exhibit 29 have created that puncture wound we just discussed?
Yes.
Can you speak to the amount of force that was necessary to create the wounds at the base of the scalp that appear to be Phillips head screwdriver wounds, as well as the knife wounds that were below that you just discussed?
Yeah, so the knife, again, probably the greatest amount of resistance is going to be entering the skin. Once it cuts through the skin, then most of the muscles and the membranes are fairly easy to cut through and cause damage. The Phillips screwdriver, because it's not sharp, it's a blunt, it would be a significant amount of force. Once it gets through that skin, there wouldn't be as much force, but there would be a significant amount of force, and probably more force than what you would need with a knife.
Did you document anything else relevant to your findings in the photographs in this slide?
That includes everything I want to point out in these.
Your Honor, I think that'll be a good breaking point.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would remind you of your admonition. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Please continue to keep an open and attentive mind. I would ask that you return to the courthouse at 1:20. We'll do our best to start at 1:30. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.
All rise for the jury.